Hi, everybody. Welcome back to part two of our Google Forms presentation. I'm not going to go through, this is Sharon talking, I'm not going to go through the long presentation this morning, this evening, because you all know Chrissy at this point, and you're just here to start learning about your part two of your Google Forms. So without further ado, if you can hear me, here's Chrissy, and she's going to show her screen. And let me just do something right now.
Yeah, Sharon, I was just about to
I
say.
did it.
There we go.
And she's ready to go. So get ready to learn more about Google Forms.
Okay, here we go. Let me get rid of that. All right, guys, here we are back again. Today we are going to focus on some of the settings that we did not get a chance to talk about last time. And we're going to go into some of the add-ons that are really cool to use. So you're not going to have, like in the past webinars, there's a tiny URL that's a set of slides. Like you're not going to have that today. We're simply going to use a form that I created, sent out to my PLN. You can see here I got 66 responses, and it'd be interesting to see during the course of the next hour how other people, when they continue to respond, because I put it out on social media about an hour ago, I guess. So we talked last week about how to create a simple form. So hopefully you guys remember. And what I did here was create a very simple form, just called it mental math. And I gave some very, very simple questions here. And I made it a quiz. So last time we did not do that. We just simply had, we created a form that was just questions. So this time it's actually in a quiz. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with going across the toolbar here to make sure that we cover everything that we may not have covered last time. And we're going to leave add-ons, the little puzzle piece, until the very end because we're not quite ready for that yet. So really quickly, I think we went through the color palette last time, but I'm not 100% sure. So we're going to go over it once again. When you click on the color palette, it gives you the option to change what the form looks like. So if you click on a color, it's going to change the color of the background. One of the things I especially like down here, if you hit this little icon here, the image icon, it gives you some choices to play around with what your form actually looks like. So for teaching, most of what we do is, falls into, work and school. There's some neat ones down here. One of my favorites, and I think I may have showed you last week, was in food and dining. And I'm going to run down here to the popcorn. So if you watch it closely, you can see the popcorn popping here. And I think that's pretty neat. And if you look over here, watch this guy right here. He's actually drinking a drink. Yeah, you guys see that? So I think that's pretty cool. And there's lots of different ones and that you can choose from. So for today, I just left it, a very simple color, nothing fancy, because I just wanted to do it as a sample. So that is something that you could certainly play around with. And even people outside of education are using Google Forms for all different sorts of things, invitations to parties or whatnot, or surveys. So all of those different themes definitely come in handy. We did talk last week about the preview, this little eye here. When you click on that, it's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to show you the front end, which is what your participants or the people that are responding, the kids, members of your school community, whoever you are giving the form to, this is what they are going to see. So if you notice, there's none of the details. And let me go back to the back end here. So they don't see questions and responses. They don't see form description. They don't see all of the setting options that we have. They don't see the toolbar here on the right. So it does look slightly different. And one of the most important out of all of the settings is obviously the settings gear, because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes here that I don't know if we covered last week. So there's 3 tabs. There's general, there's presentation, and there's quizzes. So we're going to go back to the general. I'm going to go over this quickly because I do believe we covered this last week. Really, really important is if you want your questions, your surveys, your forms, whatever it is, to be anonymous, like in the case of the mental math one that I just threw out there on social media, I didn't care who the people were. It didn't matter. I just needed to collect data so you and I all could analyze it together and actually show you how to use Flubaroo, which is a grading add-on. But if you're teaching kids and you want the scores using Flubaroo, which we'll talk about in a little while, if you want the scores to be able to go back to your students, you have to click this button that says collect email addresses. Otherwise, there will not be an address for the results to go back to. So hopefully that makes sense. So in the case of today with the sample, I'm going to unclick it because I really don't care who the people are and they don't really care about their responses. It's, it's simple math, 2 + 1 and 1 + 2. So pretty easy there. Another cool feature here is to limit it to 1 response. For today, I did not click the button because I wanted as much data as possible in a short amount of time. So we had something to work with tonight. But in a school setting, sometimes you want to limit it to 1 response. You want to make sure that your kids only respond 1 time. But there may be other reasons why you want kids to respond over and over and over again. If it's a book review or if it's something along those lines. But certainly with a quiz or a test, you don't want to do that. I like this option to edit after submit, because think about how many times that you have filled out a form and then after you've submitted it, you realize, oops, I made a mistake, or oops, I forgot something, or oh, I should have not said that, or maybe I should have said that. So this gives your respondents the opportunity to go back and edit it. And then there's also this one here, see summary charts and text responses. I very rarely use that one because people on the other side don't, kids don't really tend to pay attention to that stuff. So I usually don't use that one. Now we're gonna go to the next tab. And this one is, first of all, let me just ask, any questions about anything we've covered so far?
There's one quick question, Chrissy. The
Sure.
popcorn banner, you can create your own banners, can't you? Or can
you? Yeah, you can come in and you can upload your own if you choose to. But like images, they're not really called banners, they're just images.
Yeah.
So you would have to save the image on your device or in your drive, and then you can upload them that way.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
So the next tab here is presentation. And a couple of things here. I think we talked about this last time. If you have anything more than 10 questions, I recommend showing the progress bar so it lets people know how far away they are from like actual completion. And it shows like 25%, 50%, 75%, until they're done. Shuffling question order is cool. I'm actually going to click that one now because it really doesn't matter with the sample that we have going. But this is an easy way to alleviate cheating when you have kids that are sitting next to each other. The only suggestion I have here is don't number your questions, because then they will be all out of order. And, especially with little kids, like first thing they're gonna be like, wait, Ms. Romano, I don't understand. Number 10 is first. Shouldn't number 10 be at the end? So you just don't have to put, number 1, number 2, number 3. You can leave them without the numbers. And then there's this option to show link to submit another response. So in this particular case, I asked people to answer as many times as they felt like, because I was trying to collect lots of data in a short amount of time. So you have the option here. And then this is something that's very often overlooked. The confirmation message is what your respondents see after they submit the form. So the default is your response has been recorded. And that's kind of boring. That's kind of, that's a very sterile kind of a response. So we're going to change that one right here. And I'm going to put, thank you for helping me out with providing data for my webinar. And I'm going to save that right there. Let me go back. There we go. So now this is what my respondents will see, a little thank you. One of the things I like to do here with my students is I give them directions for the next task. So my kids know that when they sit down and they do something with a form, they know to look for that message at the end, and it's going to give them their directions of what to do next. Because kids will be kids, and you're always going to inevitably have the kid that's going to say, Ms. Romano, I'm done. What do I do now? When you may be working with a small group, or maybe it's quiet, independent reading time, and you just don't want disruptions in the class, whatever the case may be, it's a great way to have those directions and have the kids be self-motivated and take control of their learning. Any questions with the presentation setting before we move on to quizzes?
Not coming in right now, so I think it's good.
Okay. And then the last option for settings here is quizzes. And this is what we really didn't go over, I don't think, too much last time. So what I did here was I actually made these 4 questions that I gave a quiz, which means that you can assign them a point value, and then as soon as the respondents answer, if you click right here immediately after each submission, so every one of those people, when they responded, they automatically, actually in this case, I didn't collect the email addresses, but they would be able to see the results if that was the case. They would see it right away. The later option here usually is when you leave some sort of a short answer or an essay or something where the kids or the respondents have to actually write something. You would put later here. And then you would have to literally go through, and it would automatically score the objective questions, like your multiple choice, check boxes, things like that. But then you would have to go in and score manually those open-ended responses. So I'm going to be honest with you. Anything that I do open-ended, I'm going to do on a different format. I'm not going to do it on a form. I use forms to work smarter and not harder. So anything that I need to collect that objective data, I will use a form. Anything where I want kids to provide evidence, short essay, short response, anything like that, I'll probably do that in another format, like a Google Doc or Google Slides, or even pencil and paper, which I still use quite a bit in my classroom. I don't do everything online. Options here, you can decide what you want your respondent to see. If they missed questions, what the correct answers were, or point values. The only thing keep in mind is if you allow them to see the correct answers after they receive it back, you run the risk of kids showing other kids all the correct answers. And kids will be kids, and they have access to this on their smartphones as well as a tablet, Chromebook, a laptop, a desktop. So any device they're able to access this on. So the problem is if you are teaching middle school or high school, and you teach the same class period after period after period. So on Friday, you're given a quiz every period of the day. Well, you risk the chance of kids in the earlier periods giving correct answers to kids in the later periods. Then again, it's the other thing here is if you give them the responses immediately, they can literally just pull up their device and show, their friend who has you period 6 because they had you period 2, and they could show you all the questions. So there's options there. So you just kind of have to consider that. One of the ways I kind of alleviated that when I taught middle school was I taught a lot at the beginning of the year. I front loaded a lot with digital citizenship, and I really, really stressed the honor code. And I think we only had 1 or 2 incidents of it, and kids called the other kids out. And then when I had to speak to the class as a whole about, that's considered cheating. And then I spoke to the kid privately, spoke to the kid's parents, and then it didn't happen after that. So sometimes it only takes 1 to be made an example of. And then I never pointed that kid out, but the kids knew who it was, and they knew that that wasn't cool and they shouldn't have done that. So keep that in mind. I mean, not everything we do is foolproof. It's the same thing if you were doing a paper and pencil test and you had kids just, telling the other kids what the questions were. Just because it's technology, sometimes it's better, but not all the time. So those are your options there. So those are the 3 tabs for settings. We have the general, the presentation, and the quizzes. So any questions on this?
Yeah, this one, it's kind of on this, but how do you ensure that these go to the students' accounts? Do you send them via social media for your students, or how do the forms go?
No. I mean, in this, you would either do one of 2, which we're actually going to get to when we talk to Send,
Okay.
right here. Why don't I just jump right in there?
Okay.
There are different ways to
Here we
get
go.
these.
Send via.
What was that?
I see it, send via.
Yeah. So there's different ways to do that. If you are in a G Suite school, so you're using Google tools, chances are you're using Google Classroom. So if that's the case, come next week. We'll talk more about that. I think the webinar next week is Google Classroom. And you simply click an icon and then it just pops up and then all the kids get the form that way. That's the preferred way. But if you don't have Google Classroom, here are some of your options. You could either send it via email, so you would have to manually type in, which is kind of a pain in the neck, your kids' emails here, or you can grab the link, and it's a super long link, so I do not recommend ever writing it on the board. In my son's school, before they started using Classroom, that's what they did. They would shorten the URL, click it here, write this down, and expect the kids not to make mistakes, trying to put that in their browser. But you could see it's a little crazy. It's very easy to mistake a 0 for an O, the letter O, the ones and the L's. So kids make mistakes that way. But if you have some other learning management system like Edmodo or Schoology, or you use a website, you could always just grab, when I say grab, I mean copy and paste the URL into your learning management system or onto a website. And then you could always, a website I'm not too keen on because then it's open to the world, and you don't necessarily want that. So the preferred method is Google Classroom, but then you could also take the links and dump it into a learning management system that way. If it's something like I did today where I wanted to put it on social media, you could hit Google Plus is Google Communities, Facebook, and Twitter. You could simply create it, click on it, and then it pushes it out to social media that way. Because keep in mind, you're not always going to use forms for asking questions of your students. Sometimes you will use forms for other things where, you want to know what people think about something in particular, like I did today. And here's the other thing here. If you want to collect their email addresses, you would click on that. There's another option to do it here as well. Any questions, Sharon, before I move on?
No, that's great. Thank you. Oh, wait. Oh, no, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. And then lastly, over here, we have the 3 dots. And I tell people all the time, when you are experimenting with a new tool, whether it's Google or something else, click on everything, right? Just click on it, play around with it, invest a little bit of time, because sometimes you learn better when you're just kind of figuring things out yourself. And the webinar is great and it's going to steer you in the right direction. But when you go to use these on your own, you may forget and not have access to the webinar. So click on everything. And I always say click on the 3 dots because that is an icon that's used over and over and over again throughout all of the G Suite tools. So when you click on it, you have some options here. So let's just say you made this mental math quiz. And you're going to do mental math once a week, every week for 6 weeks. So you may just want to make a copy of it, and you may be doing the same questions all the time because you're trying to build mastery. And I know I've seen math teachers do that when they do, I'm trying to think what it's called. My husband's a math teacher. Like quick skill and drill, like when they come in first thing, it is like a mental math, but they're quick little drills. They take like a minute. Just to try to see if the kids can learn their basic facts. So if that's the case, you just want to make lots and lots of copies of it. And the goal there is for kids to compete against themselves, and that each week or each day when they take that particular quiz or, answer those questions, the goal is to get more right each time that you take it. So that's one of the reasons why you would just simply want to make a copy instead of recreating the same form over and over and over again. So hopefully that makes sense. Move to trash is pretty obvious. That's deleting it when you realize you made it and you don't want it anymore. I tend not to do that because you never know when you're going to need something again, but it's certainly always an option. We're going to come back to the get pre-filled link because I actually found a really great 1.5-minute video that'll explain it way better than me explaining it. So we're going to come back to that one. Print is obvious. If you simply want to print it out. So I had a situation a couple of times over the years where kids have to parents, I should say, have to fill out a permission slip in order for them to be allowed to use the Google tools in school. So, you're always going to have those kids that take a little bit longer than some others. So I was ready to get up and rolling after the first week of school because 98% of the kids brought in the permission slip, and I gave them a deadline and I told them straight up, if you don't have it by this deadline, we're moving forward with or without you, and they're going to be doing things on the Chromebook, and then you're going to be doing things paper and pencil. So, just putting it out there so the kids were aware. So lo and behold, you always have that one kid that for whatever the reason never brings it back. So what I did was I printed out the form, and then they did the same thing the kids were doing at the same time, except the kids were on the Chromebooks, they were pencil and paper. And lo and behold, the very next day, the kid brought in his form and, was ready to go. Adding collaborators is literally if you want to share it with somebody. So think about all of the other Google tools that you've used, slides and docs and sheets. They have a little blue button up here that looks like the send, but it says share. So if you're working on a quiz or a test or a survey or worksheet or whatever it is, and you want to collaborate with somebody else, you click the share button. Well, we don't have that option here. We have add collaborators. So when you do that, you simply add the email address to that person, and it's going to share with them. So they will have access to it. Keep in mind, as always, if you're going to share something, you have to remind that person they need to make a copy, right up here, make a copy to make it their own. So here's an example. If you are on a grade level team with a bunch of fourth grade teachers and you all decided you're going to use the same back to school night survey, if you add them as collaborators, so you come up with the questions together, but in the end, they don't make their own copy, what's going to happen is when your parents come in for back to school night and they respond, all of the data is going to be dumped into one spreadsheet. And that's going to be confusing, because if you didn't ask the question, who was your child's homeroom teacher, then you're not going to know who's who. So that's really important. So you add the collaborators to work with somebody, or you created a form and you're just sharing it with somebody, but then you have to remind them to make that copy. So in the end, the data goes on their own spreadsheet and not on yours. Any questions?
No, we're good. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's pretty easy. This is really not tricky stuff. This is pretty easy. Script editor is when you start doing coding in the background. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know anybody that does that other than Alice Keeler and my friend Adam Schoenbart. And they literally are the queen and the king of Google Forms and Sheets. I don't know anybody else that does that. So, and I'm not an expert in coding. So we're going to just move on past that. We're going to come back, like I said, to the pre-filled link in just a moment, and then add-ons we're going to get to later when we actually start looking at the responses. But we're going to jump down here now to preferences. So preferences, again, here's a third opportunity to collect email addresses. And sometimes you find with Google tools, they give you more than one way to do the same thing. And you just choose the one that works best for you. Here's one that I absolutely love, making questions required. So what this is here are default settings. So basically it sets you up that you don't have to go through. So I'm going to cancel this for a second. When we made this the first time, I'm going to click here in the question. Let's go back to edit question. Remember this little tab we talked about last week? And if you toggle it off, that means they can submit it and not answer. But if you toggle it on, and they try to submit, but they skipped it, it's not going to allow them to skip it. So I've had this happen to me before because we're all human and we all make mistakes. I forgot to toggle one. So then you have kids that submit, and then when you look at the results, you're like, oh, forgot to hit that one. Some kids answered it, some kids forgot. And then, that's kind of a faulty assessment when you do it that way, and it's kind of your fault. So when that happens, I usually just give the kids credit for it, because it's really my fault. So let's go back to preferences here. If you click make questions required, it automatically will default to the required instead of the opposite, which is not required. So I really like that. And the same thing with point value. You can make the point value whatever you want. And if you want them to be the same point values every single time, you would leave it. But to be honest with you, I don't necessarily know that that's the case. So I don't use it. So I typically don't. But I really do like this feature here. I'm going to save that right there. So those are the basic settings. Any questions before we move into pre-filled links and the add-ons?
No, I think everyone's getting it.
Okay.
Really good.
So this idea of the pre-filled link, I'm going to be quite honest. I'm going to show you a quick little video that's going to explain it a whole lot better than me. And this guy, the guru, is somebody on YouTube that you may want to subscribe to, because literally everything that he talks about is Google related, and he's very easy to understand. So we're going to watch this, and we're not watching the whole 3 minutes here. We're going to stop when he starts talking about business related stuff. So here we go.
Hey there everyone, and welcome back to Google Guru. So today I'm going to go over a really quick tip for Google Forms that allows you to pre-fill responses. Now, this is definitely useful for people in a number of different industries, but I found that teachers and people in the EDU community are heavy users of Google Forms, so I think this is especially useful for you guys. So for example, if you're a teacher and you're constantly sending out Google Forms to have your students submit their various assignments, you probably don't want to have to create a new Google form whenever you have an assignment. So a great way to remedy this is to create a default Google form and then pre-fill one of the fields that will vary based on the assignment. So for example, here I have this basic form where a student would include their first name, last name, section number, assignment name, and the shared assignment link in Google Drive. Now, obviously, some of these fields are going to vary based on the student and the section that they're in, but the assignment name is something that I can control based off of whatever naming convention that I want to use for the assignment. So to get a pre-filled response for one of your Google Form fields, just go to the Responses tab at the top of the screen and select Get Pre-filled URL. So this will open up a version of this form, and you can fill out any of these fields here that you want to pre-fill a response. So I'm going to go down to assignment name and just type in the naming convention. When I'm done, I'll hit submit. As you can see here, this link pops up at the top of my screen with a new URL to share my form. So when I'm ready to send this out to my students, I can just copy this URL here and send it out to them. So you want to make sure that the settings for the form are set in the original form, but then you'll want to share this URL instead of the conventional one. So to give you an idea of what this looks like, I'll open it up as a new user. So as you can see, all of the fields are empty except for this assignment name here. So I can just go ahead and fill this out. And hit submit. Now if I go back into the responses spreadsheet, you can see I have this nice little breakdown using my specific naming conventions. So like I said, this is definitely a great tip for teachers and people in the EDU community, but this is also definitely useful for any other industry. So if you have something that's submitted by...
Okay, we're going to stop right there because then he starts going on into business and whatnot. So hopefully that made sense. It was much more clear to watch him do it. And I wanted to show the video because now it's captured in the webinar. So you'll be able to go back and once Sharon sends you the link for the webinar, you'll be able to go back and watch that again. So I thought that was a particularly useful video. Okay, let's see, where are we at? Okay, so let's go back to our form. So we already know how to make the questions because we did that last time. So now let's take a look at responses. So we're going to click on responses, and we had 67 people respond, and it automatically analyzes data for you. You certainly, are going to want to go in and look at it in greater detail. But right here, it gives you a bar chart, gives you the average, the median, and the range. For each question, it tells you how many, people got it correct, how many, the percentage. So 86.6% got this one correct. And by the way, when I sent this out to my PLN, I specifically said, please answer some of them wrong. So you guys didn't see faulty data with all of the correct answers. It's not gonna, wouldn't look, it wouldn't exactly look right, and it's not good for demonstration purposes. So I'm sure that all of my friends know what 2 plus 1 is, but 7.5% got it wrong, gave the answer as 1, and 6% said the answer was 2. And same thing down here, if you could see. So it gives you the individual for each one of those. Now you can actually go, that was a summary of all of the 67 responses. Now you can go by question. So you could look just at the question. If you forgot what your answer options were, you can click here. So the options were either 1, 2, or 3. And then you can take a look and see, let's hide those options again, what the responses look like here. So 58 responses came in with the correct answers. You could also add feedback here. That will go back to them as well. So you can, click on add feedback and you can type in whatever you want to say there, and so on. And here's the next response. Here's the next response, that way. So that's by question. But here's the one that really comes in handy, is the individual version. Now, in this particular case, since I did not collect, I didn't ask them, what is your name? And I also did not collect email addresses. So this was strictly anonymous. But in the case when you're working with students, of course, you're going to put their names down or have them put their names in. So here where it says email address, I made it anonymous, but if it would have their name here. So let's just say this was Sharon's, these were her responses. You would see everything that Sharon responded here, right? You see it says response number 7. So I'm going to click here and we're going to go to another person. So now it's response number 8. So let's just say this was Chrissy's response. And then you'd be able to see exactly what each child or each respondent said for their answers. And then you can add individual feedback, not only per child, but per question. So I think that's a really nice feature that they added last year. Any questions so far?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to dig a little bit deeper and we're going to talk about those add-ons that you guys asked me about last week. So the first thing here I want to point out also is this little toggle that says accepting responses. So as long as this is toggled green, that means your form is open and available for people to respond. So if I click on this right now, that means anybody on social media now that sees it and they click on it, they're not going to be able to respond. It's going to say something along the lines of, I'm sorry, but this form is now closed, or this form is no longer accepting responses. There's some like generic phrase that goes out there. So this is a way for you to manually do that. So you can keep it open and you can close it. So you may do something like, you tell kids, by lunchtime today, if you're going to come in for lunch recess, you need to fill out such and such a form. And then, you set an alarm on your phone or whatever, and you go in and you shut it. So if a kid comes in at 12:01, he says, well, I tried to fill out the form. I said, yeah, but we closed it at 11:55. So also teaches kids to value time and be respectful of deadlines and things along those lines. So I like that feature. That's something new they added a while, I guess, over the last year or so. So other things you have to pay attention. Remember when I said you always want to click those little dots here? This is all about notifications. So here's the thing. This will drive you insane if you click on get email notifications for new responses. So think about it. I had 67 people respond to this. And if I put notifications on here, that means I would be getting 67 emails telling me that people are responding. Now, it depends on what it is. You very well may want that because you're trying to keep track of things. And so it's entirely up to you, but you have that option there. Select response destination, we're going to talk about in a minute. If you want to download all the responses, it'll download to a spreadsheet, but it's going to do that automatically, so you really don't need to do that separately. And then, of course, if you want to print all the responses or delete all the responses, those are pretty self-explanatory. But here is where things get really cool. So we know that you ask questions on a form and you collect responses on a form, but the data all goes into a spreadsheet, because people ask all the time, okay, I know I'm collecting data using the form, but where does the data go? It goes to a spreadsheet. Where is that spreadsheet? Right here. So remember, we have the question tab, which is where you build your form, but the response tab is where you're looking at the data, you're analyzing it in different ways. So we are going to click on this spreadsheet here. Now, when you create a form for the first time, there's no spreadsheet created yet. So it's all kind of, I don't know exactly how Google works its magic, but it's holding the data somewhere. It's not quite in a form. It's not in a sheet yet. So when you click on this icon, you have some options here. Create a new spreadsheet, and it's going to be named whatever the form is, unless you want to go in and change it, or select existing spreadsheet. 9 times out of 10, you're going to create a new spreadsheet. But there will be times when you're going to want to use a spreadsheet that you've already created together. So let me give you an example. Mental math. So let's say every Friday, you give your kids a multiplication quiz or division or whatever, math facts that it is, every week, every Friday for 6 weeks. And, you want the kids to master their facts and show growth over time and, compete against themselves and things along those lines. So if that's the case, you're not going to want to have 6 separate spreadsheets. What you would do is select an existing one. So in this case, you would click on this, and then it would give you an option of existing spreadsheets. And then what you do is when you look at a spreadsheet at the very bottom, so let's create the new one first. So we can actually talk about a spreadsheet when you have a spreadsheet in front of you. So here's all of our data. It's still loading. So at the very bottom of a spreadsheet, you have these little tabs. So this tab here is for all of this data that you see here. Now, if you are giving the same quiz every Friday for 6 weeks, it would make sense to put all of the data on one spreadsheet. So what would happen is this would be week 1, and then there would be another tab here that would be week 2, and that would have all the data on another spreadsheet within the larger spreadsheet. And then over here you would have another tab that would be, let's see if we add them here. So there's sheet 2. There's sheet 3. So you would rename them week 1, week 2, week 3, and then the data is going to be on each of those individual sheets within the larger one. Does that make sense?
I think people are good.
Yeah, we're good.
Can I ask a question about feedback?
Sure.
Someone wants to know, when you give the feedback, does it go to everyone or only the students who chose that answer?
All right, so let's go back here. It depends on, where are we? Let me get rid of that one. Let's go back to this one here. It depends on if you're on the individual tab or on the question tab. So if you're on the question tab, if you give feedback, 58 people are going to get that piece of feedback.
Okay.
If you're on the individual one and you give, it's individual feedback. It's only going to go to number 8.
Number 8. Great.
Which I think was me. Great, right? I think you were 7, Sharon, right? And I was 8.
Yes.
So does that make sense? Does that clarify?
Yes, great. Thank you.
Okay. So here we are on the spreadsheet. And this is basically what it looks like. It's going to give you the timestamp, if you collected an email address, the overall score, and then the individual questions across the top and the answers. So if you're not really a math-minded person or you don't know how to use spreadsheets, this is going to look a little crazy to you. So what you can do is go up to Form and show Summary of Responses. Right, which will bring you back to what we saw here. So this gives you a basic summary of how the kids did overall. Now, the other thing here is you can see this child scored 10 out of 20 points, 20 out of 20 points, 10 out of 20 points, 5 out of 20. Now, if you're going to do them points, that's great. But in most schools, they're looking for percentages. So if you don't want to spend your time calculating all of, I mean, these are pretty easy, but if you're doing, many more questions, you don't want to calculate them into percentages. You would use something called Flubaroo, which is a really funny name for a really cool add-on. And we're going to actually use that right now. So Flubaroo is an add-on for Google Sheets. So you're not going to find it on Docs, Slides, or Forms. You're only going to find it on Sheets because that's the only way that it can be used. So we're going to go up here and click on where it says add-ons. And then we're going to click on Get Add-ons. And the neat thing here is it's only going to give you add-ons that can be used with the particular tool that you're talking about. So here's Flubaroo. It's always going to pop up here. And it is free. So you're going to click on free. And you're just going to basically follow the steps to get it working here. All right, you're always going to click on allow. And you see at the bottom, it popped up that it's working here. So anytime there's any updates, it's going to show you updates here in the right corner. So there are no updates right here. So we're going to X out of that. And it says once you've collected student submissions, choose grade assignment. And it gives you some basic instructions. So I'm actually going to walk you through it. It can be a little complicated, but you don't have to write down the steps like as I'm talking because you have access to the webinar. So when you actually go to do this with real data, you can literally just like play the webinar and follow step by step. So we're going to click on add-ons again. We're going to go to Flubaroo. And if you simply want to grade the assignment for your purposes, you would click on grade assignment. But most of the time, people use Flubaroo because they not only want it to auto grade, but they want it to auto grade and then send back to the students. So we're going to skip down here to advanced, and we're going to click on enable auto grade. Give it a second to load. And it always says before enabling auto grade, you have to set up your grading and email settings, which is super easy to do. We click OK. And here's step one. So Flubaroo is kind of intuitive, so it understands when it says email address, it knows that it's identifying the student and there's no point value. If the kids had a name, it would still say the same thing, identifying student, it'll say like student name, and then there's no point value. Now for me, I never change the point values here because I leave it the standard grading out of 100%. So I want it to be that standard grading system. It's the same thing as if you're using an easy grader, that's always out of 100%. So I leave them with the grading, with the scoring the way that it is. I keep normal grading. But there are other options if you want to skip something or you want to grade it by hand. That's entirely up to you. So if you grade it by hand, it's not going to give it a score. If you skip grading, obviously that's not going to score it either. And if you click identify student, it's the same thing. It's not going to give it a point value. So then we're going to click continue. Okay, so one of the things that I failed to do was to create an answer key. So this is what it's asking you to do now. Which submission should be used as the answer key? So this is my bad. I should not have, I forgot to do that. But what we will do is I'm going to look back at the responses quickly. And actually, I'm going to go back here. And what I'm going to do is go to the preview. And what I do is when it asks for not email address, when it asks for name, I put in answer key. So then it's not really the name, it's the answer key, and it's an easy one to look for. So 3 minus 2 is 1, 2 plus 1 is 3, 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 minus 1 is 2. I am not a robot. And I'm going to submit, it's not going to give me the email address. So let me just put mine in really quick, and we'll know that this one is our answer key. Okay, so here, by the way, this is what people see when they answer. View your score, edit your response, submit another response. All right, so we're going to go back here. So I am going to, let's see if it's going to pop up now. It may not because I started it before. I apologize, guys. Let me go back and start that again. I'll go really quick. advanced, enable auto grade. Right, we talked about that. Continue. Okay, now let's look for it. It should pop up. There it is. So this is the one I put in. So what I normally do is instead of the student name, I just write answer key so I know it when I'm looking for it. So this is going to be the answer key, which is going to be used to score against all the others. Okay, so the email address question, obviously you want it going back to their email. One of the things I like to do is send it both email and Drive, because it can be glitchy and sometimes the kids will say, oh, it's not showing up in my Drive, but then they see it in their email. If you're working with younger students, sometimes in grades K to 2, they don't have access to email, but they do have access to Google Drive. You would click on this one, share via Google Drive, and then the responses will pop up there in recent, and they'll be able to see it that way. So right here, I'm just gonna put both. You can include the list of questions and scores. And again, same as before, you have to decide whether or not you want to include an answer key. And then you could put whatever you want here as a message to your students. It's entirely up to you. Okay, some recent submissions have yet to be graded. Would you like Flubru to grade them before auto grade? So that would be a yes. So we're going to click yes. And it's actually grading right now. You can see up here on the left, it says grading in process. And then you'll notice on the bottom, oops, where did it go? Okay, you know what happened? All of these came in, I guess, beforehand. It should say grades on the bottom. I did see it there a minute ago. Didn't you see that, Sharon?
Yeah, it said yes.
It did. It did see grades.
Yeah.
So let's see what happened here. Let's go back. Yeah, I don't know why it did that.
But it would show it on the bottom there.
It did. It did. It did show it, and now I don't see it. So let me disable the auto grade. And let's try that again. Let's go to Flubru. Let's just grade it this time because I want you guys to see what it actually looks like. I'm just going to go through the whole same thing again. And this is where, guys, you have to be patient. That mistakes do happen, and there are glitches sometimes, and you can't let it drive you crazy. So now it's going to grade here. It's going to pop up here on the bottom.
It happens with our GoToWebinar too. People have issues getting on these webinars sometimes. It's just the technology. It's nothing big. No,
Okay, now see, this is glitchy. Obviously we have responses, so I don't know why it would not create one. I'm not really sure. But let me, you know what? I am always thinking, so let me go into my Drive so you guys can actually see what one looks like with the grades there. And I apologize, but that's obviously not me. We did it twice and it would not work. Let's see, let me show you something my kids did last year. It's gonna take me a minute to find it. Here we go. Okay, here we go. This one hopefully is scored. And then you'll see it at the bottom. Give it a minute to load. Okay, so you see up here where it has my username and I said answer key. I created the answer key. So what it is, I'm always the first person to go in and take an answer and respond to that form before anybody else does. And instead of putting my name, you can see all the kids put their names here, but instead of putting my name, I put answer key. So that's exactly what I was talking about. So this one auto graded, so it did go back to the kids in their Drive and their email. But if you see here on the bottom, it is going to create a spreadsheet with grades. So you can see it has the submission time, the username, which is the email, the student's name, and then their actual percent. So anything below, I think, an 80% shows up in red. So you're able to see what the kids did. And then, how many times did they submit it? And sometimes you will find that a kid will try to submit more than one. And then it goes across and it gives all of the details there. So at least you're able to see it. I don't know why it didn't work on the last one, but at least you were able to see that.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. It's really neat. It really is a game changer for when it was, before that you would have to go in and like manually score everything, which is crazy. So anybody that teaches middle school or high school, this really is a game changer. It's like a nice alternative to the Scantron, where the kids would have to fill out the bubbles, and then you take the little Scantron sheets, you go to the Scantron machine, and then you have to run it through. The nice thing about it is it scores things immediately, and it sends it right back to the kids right then and there, so they're able to get immediate feedback, which is key. Because think about how many times as a student, when you were a student, you submitted something to your teacher or your professor, and sometimes you didn't get it back for a week or 2 weeks. And it's like, yeah, okay, like the learning is lost now. Like, it's over. I don't care about the grade anymore. So there's that. So that's Flubaroo. There is one more. We have just enough time to show you. We're going to go back to.
Can I ask a few questions that have come in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Really quickly, some people just wanted a little more information on the spreadsheets, but I think that we've covered it. If we didn't, just throw a question out there. Someone asked about email addresses. If a student doesn't have email addresses, but you showed that they get notified through their Google Drive, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One question is, you have to add Flubaroo to each spreadsheet you create? Is that correct?
Once you add Flubaroo, it's always going to be, what I did was I actually, even though I use it, I deleted it so I could show you guys how to actually add it, what it looks like for you for the first time. But once you add it, it will pop up under your add-ons. See the way it is here? It'll always pop up. And then you just have to activate it. Like you have to go in and click whatever it is. But once you add it, you will always have it. You don't have to go through that process of accepting each time.
Perfect. And there's one more question, and I hope that this is understandable. So if you want to document, I guess, a spreadsheet with cumulative information, for example, week 1 to 5, can this information be merged into one document as the information is loaded within each sheet? I don't know if that's clear. She said the same thing. I hope it's clear. So
I'm not sure what you mean. So if it's cumulative information, and it obviously means gathered over time, you would have week 1, week 2, and then another one would be week 3. It's all within the larger spreadsheet.
Okay.
But you would have different tabs on the bottom. Does that make sense? I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it might be that if you want a whole bunch of different weeks, can that be merged into one document?
It is one document, but it's separate tabs on the bottom.
Got it.
It's spreadsheets within one larger spreadsheet.
Okay. I think that might be it, but we'll see if she writes back. And one more question about mixing up questions. How do you keep the question about what is your name from being included in your questions?
You can't. You can't. You tell the kids up front.
Number 6?
There's no, we've asked for that. There's no way to pin it to the top.
Okay.
But we just tell the kids, you just got to let them know. Once you tell them the first time, then they expect it. And just say, listen, somewhere along the way, it's going to ask you for your name. It could be the first question, the middle question, the last question. Just answer it whenever.
A little clarification about that other question. What this person is asking is, rather than checking each tab, can the tabs be merged into one larger spreadsheet, or are they separated in tabs all the time?
It's going to be separated into separate tabs.
So it can't be merged into one larger.
I don't know if it can be. I've never done that. I've never seen a use for that. But that's a good question. I mean, you could probably Google that and you'll find an answer.
Okay.
But I'm not entirely sure. Or whoever that person is, email me on the side, and then I'll ask some other trainers if that's the case. It's just I've never been asked that question, and I've never done it myself.
Okay.
But I definitely know people that will have an answer. So whoever that person is, just email me, and I will make sure I get you that answer.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Okay, and there's only one more that I really wanted to show you so we can make sure that we finish on time. We're going to go back up to add-ons here, and we're going to go to get add-ons the same way that we added Flubaroo. And we're going to look for one called form limiter. So I'm going to search it here. Form limiter. And I'm not seeing it. Did I spell it wrong? Limiter. Did I spell that? Maybe I spelled it wrong.
Limiter. Limiter.
Yeah, right?
Yep.
Let's see. Let's go up to Google and see. There's one called form limiter. Oh, it says not working. Look at that.
Ugh.
Let's see. I don't know. Sometimes these things come and go in the Chrome Web Store. Oh, here it is. Maybe I don't know, sometimes. Yeah, there it is. Oh, you know what it is? Look, there's no space.
Okay.
There's no space. That's it. And I already have it installed. It's already there. So let me go back. So what you would do is you would actually install it the way we install the other one, although I don't see it here. Let's see, manage add-ons, Flubaroo. I do not have it added. I don't know why it's saying that I do. Basically, form limiter, I don't know why it's saying that I have it and I don't. Form limiter, what it does is, you can read it right here, it shuts off a Google form after a certain number of responses is reached. So remember before over here, I said that you can, here it is, accepting responses. You can turn this off on your own, right?
Right.
Sometimes you don't want to do that because you're going to forget. So form limiter, what it does is it could either, you could say, I'm only going to accept 10 responses. And then after those 10 responses, it automatically shuts the form off. So you don't have to think about it. The other way that it does is when it's reached a certain time, you can even put a time limit on it. So instead of having to manually go back into the form and shut it off, like when I said before, set an alarm on your phone, go back in and turn it off. If you use form limiter, you can go in and just set a time on there, the day and the time, and it'll automatically shut off your form and not accept responses. So one of the nice features, one of the reasons I like that feature is if you have kids, you don't want them going home and submitting other responses or editing their responses once they get home. You could have it set at 2:55 or whatever the end of your school day is, or whatever lunchtime is, or however you want to work it. You can have it turned off. So the kids can't go home then and go back in and edit their response and change their answers, because you will have no way of knowing that. So I'm sorry that one didn't work. We had some glitches tonight, Sharon. That's not fun.
We had glitches for GoToWebinar too. A couple of people had issues in the beginning, so maybe it's just the moon or something.
Yeah, it could be. Who knows? Maybe it's the eclipse. Blame it on the eclipse.
We'll
Right?
blame it on the eclipse.
So that's pretty much it. So we do have 2 minutes if anybody has any more questions. And of course, you guys always know you can reach me by email.
Right. And you can always email me and I can pass them along to Chrissy as well. But
Yep, absolutely.
I don't see any questions right now. People are saying thank you. But while I have this little bit of time, this minute, I'm just going to tell you all, if you are signed up for the Google Classroom, which is number 5 in our series with Chrissy Romano, thank you very much, Chrissy. It is next Wednesday at 7. And just want to let you know that there's a really large amount of people signed up for it. And there is kind of a limit when you do GoToWebinar. So if you are signed up for it, I'm going to tell you people, because you've been here all the time, sign in early, okay? Just, you can walk away from your computer, but just sign in, because we may reach the limit next week. So just everyone saying thank you. Thank you all for attending. And Chrissy, thank you again for number 4. And
you're welcome.
I'm thinking we're going to see most of you next week at number 5. And that's it. And you will be getting your certificate as well for this. So if you have any questions, let me know or let Chrissy know. And we'll see you next Wednesday, right?
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.